Dear students, welcome to the biological science class, class 9. In the last class, we have seen and we have learned about things that we cannot see with our eyes. So let us quickly revise what we have learned in the previous class and let's proceed further. We see many living things around us, but there are many things that we cannot see with our naked eye. We cannot see the bacteria, we cannot see the virus, we cannot see the fungi, algae and protozoa. These are the living beings, but we cannot see with our naked eye. We also see the plants, we also see the onions and everything. But when we see the plants, we only see with our naked eye. But to see the inside, to see into the deep inside of a plant, we need a microscope. Only then we will be able to see the cells in a plant. Another example, we see onions with our naked eye. But can we see the onion cells with our naked eye? No. For that, we will need a microscope. Similarly, we see many living things around us with our naked eye. But we will need a microscope to see the brain cells or the liver cells or the intestinal cells and the blood cells. To see the deep inside of a living organism, we will need microscopes. Using these microscopes, we will be able to see the cells in a living being. So what is a cell? A cell is a basic structural and functional unit of an organism. When we say a structural and a functional unit, a cell behaves just like a human being, which means a cell has all the properties, it does all the functions a human being or a living being does. For example, a human being eats, a human being excretes, a human being digests, a human being respires, a human being reproduces. All the functions that a human being does, a cell is also able to function at a cellular level. Hence, a cell is known as the basic structural and the functional unit of an organism, because a cell provides the structure and it is also a functional unit. Hence, it is called as the smallest living organism. Now, are all cells in the same size and shape? No. Cells size are different. For example, if you see this frog egg, the size of the frog egg is 1 millimeter. If you see the bacteria, what is the size of the bacteria? It is 1 micrometer. And what is the size of the lipids? It is nearly 1 nanometer, which means the frog egg cells are bigger than the lipid cells or the atom. Okay, so different cells have different sizes. Another example, you might have seen an ostrich egg. The ostrich egg is the largest cell in the earth, on the earth. It is the size of a football. And which is the smallest cell? The smallest cell is a mycoplasma bacterium. which is only 10 micrometers in size. So this is the smallest cell on the earth and this is the biggest cell on the earth. So the size of the cells differ. Now, how about the shape of the cells? Are all cells of the same shape? No. If you see the onion cells, you will notice that the shape of the cell is somewhat rectangular. The onion cells have a rectangular shape. How about the cheek cells? In a human being, when you take the cheek cells, how do you see the shape of the cheek cell? It is somewhat irregular. It is almost shapeless, but it is kind of irregular in shape. So, the shapes of the cells also differ. Now, organisms can be of a single cell or they can be made of many cells. If living beings are made up of a single cell, they are called as unicellular organisms. For example, you have paramecium, amoeba, bacteria and yeast. You will notice that these are only single cell organisms. Now, what are multicellular organisms? All the living beings which we see with our naked eye are multicellular organisms, which means they are made up of millions and billions of cells. Okay. When an organism is made up of two or more cells, we call them as multicellular organism. So, for example, how a man is made up of cells, we can see here. This is a man. When you look close to him using a microscope, you will notice that he has organ systems. When you look close into the organ systems, you will notice that he is made up of organs. When you closely look at the organs, you will notice that organs are made up of tissues. Tissues are in turn made up of cells. So, when many such cells combine together, the product is a multicellular organism. Now, let us see a typical cell. A typical cell is a model cell, which means we are using this cell as a reference point to compare it with other cells. Okay, this cell may or may not exist in the real life, but we have just made a model of it to show the different organelles in a single picture. Okay, that is called as a typical cell. For example, you see that in the typical cell we have drawn a cell wall, but the cell wall is absent in a animal cell. Okay, and we have also shown chloroplasts in this typical cell, but not all plant cells have chloroplasts in them. Okay, so a typical cell is just a model cell that we have developed so that we can explain all the parts together in a single frame. Now, this is a typical plant cell structure and this is a typical animal cell structure. I want you to look into your text box and see the differences and the similarities between the cells. This I have given you as a homework. I will discuss the answers after the session. So, these are the different parts of a cell. A cell has a cell wall, which is unique in plants. There is a cell membrane, nucleus, cytoplasm and other cell organelles. When we say organelles, we mean organelles such as Golgi complex, ribosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, nucleus, chloroplasts, vacuoles, mitochondria, all these are the cell organelles. So, first let us study about the cell membrane. A cell membrane is also called as the plasma membrane. Okay, what is the plasma membrane or a cell membrane? When you notice a cell, it is made up of a covering. Every cell has a covering. This covering is called as the cell membrane. Okay, so what is a cell membrane made of? It is made up of lipids and proteins, which is made up of fats or proteins, you can say. Okay, this yellow covering, which is the covering of a cell, when you look closely into this cell membrane, you will notice that it is made up of proteins and fats. So what does a cell membrane do? It protects the contents of the cell. When you look into the cell, there is this blue part, there is the nucleus, the cytoplasm nucleus, there is Golgi complex, there is endoplasmic reticulum. So the cell membrane protects all that is which is in the cell. Okay, so it is a protective membrane. Now, just as you see that a house is made up of gates and all, so that it protects the people inside the house. In the same way, the cell membrane protects the cytoplasm and all the contents in the cell. It is made up of proteins and lipids. Further, what does it do? It only allows exchange of specific substances through it. Okay, so what does this plasma membrane do? Does it allow everything to go inside it and enter the cell? No, it allows only certain substances like sugars or proteins or carbohydrates, or only certain things can enter the cell wall and enter the cell. Not all substances, only few selected proteins or sugars can enter the cell wall. Hence, it is said to be as selectively permeable, which means only selected items, selected molecules or substances can go through the cell wall and enter the cell. So, it protects the cell. What is the function of a cell membrane now? It protects the cell and it clearly helps in balancing the internal and the external environment. So, you see that the cell has an internal environment. Internal environment is the environment in the cell, inside the cell, internal, inside the cell. External environment is the environment outside the cell. So, this plasma membrane or the cell membrane helps in maintaining the balance between the outside membrane or the external membrane and the inside membrane or inside environment, the internal environment. Okay. So, the plasma membrane, it creates a balance between external environment and the internal environment. Now, we will go to cell wall. Do all cells have a cell wall? No, only the plant cell has a cell wall. Animal cells do not have a cell wall. You see this? Okay, this is the cell wall, which is present only in the plant cell. Okay, so now a plant cell has a plasma membrane or the cell membrane, and in additional it also has a cell wall. So the cell wall is like an extra layer around the cell. So what does the cell wall do? It gives shape and protection to the cell. Okay, so when you observe the cell wall, so this is the cell wall which is seen only in the plant cells. Okay, it is like an extra outer layer. So this is the plasma membrane, and outside this there is another thick layer. So this is the cell wall. You see the cell wall? Yes. So this cell wall is very tough and very flexible, like the bricks that make the wall. Okay, in your house you see the walls are made up of bricks. Tough. How are they? Very tough. But these cell walls are not only tough, but they are also flexible. Okay. So these cell walls, what is their function? They usually what happens is, you see this vacuole. This vacuole is like a air balloon. Okay, when you blow air into a bubble, what does it do? When you blow air into a balloon, it keeps on expanding and expanding. In the same way, when you see a plant cell, water keeps on coming into the cell. So this vacuole keeps on increasing in its size, and when it increases in its size, it exerts pressure on the cell wall. Because it keeps on increasing in its size, it increases the pressure on the cell wall. So the cell wall creates an internal pressure so that a balance is maintained and the structure of the cell is also maintained. So the cell wall is seen only in the plant cells. It is like an extra layer outside the cell membrane. It is tough and flexible also. It gives shape and protection to the cell. It is made up of cellulose. When you see this cell wall, the green one, the cell wall is made up of a substance called as cellulose. This substance is responsible for making the cell wall stiff, making the plants stiff and straight. Without the cellulose, without the cell wall, plants they can't stand straight, they just droop. So the main function of the cell wall is to create an inward pressure that goes inwards, because the vacuole or the cell sap creates an outward pressure. So the cell wall creates an inward pressure and maintains the balance. Now let us observe the nucleus. A nucleus is called as a cell's control room. This is the most important part in a cell. Just as a human body has reproductive cells, it has different kinds of cells, right? This is called as the cell's control room because it contains the genetic information of the cell. Okay, how a cell has to function, what should it digest, when should it excrete, how should it respire, how should it send the waste materials out of the cell. Everything is, all the programming is done in the nucleus. Okay, so the nucleus is the cell's control room. This is the nucleus when you observe under a microscope. So when you observe under a microscope, when you observe a cell under a microscope, this is how the nucleus is seen. So Robert Brown gave the name nucleus. Robert Brown in the year 1831, okay, he was a scientist who gave the name nucleus, and Schleiden called the nucleus as a cytoplast. It is large and distinct of all organelles. Okay, so when you see a cell, okay, any typical cell, when you observe, what is it that you clearly see? You will be able to clearly see and distinctly see a nucleus. Okay, when you observe a cell, the first and foremost thing that you can see is a nucleus. So it was called nucleus by Robert Brown in the year 1831. Later, Schleiden named this nucleus as a cytoplast, and it is the large and the distinct of all cell organelles. Out of the mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi bodies, lysosomes and other structures, this is the largest of all the organelles. Okay, it is large and biggest of all these organelles. What are its functions? It regulates and controls all the functions of a cell. What are the functions of a cell? Functions of a cell can be digesting the material, reproduction, excreting waste out of a cell, respiration in the cell. All these are the functions of a cell. So, the nucleus helps in regulating the functions of a cell. Okay. And next, it determines the characteristic of an organism. It contains the genetic information. Okay. And it is involved in cell division. What does it mean to contain genetic information? What does it mean to determine the characteristics of an organism? For example, you might have seen your father and your mother. Okay, you are born out of your parents, right? So when you observe yourself in the mirror, you will notice some of the features that you have from your parents, like you might have your father's skin color, you might have your mother's nose. So this nucleus helps in storing the genetic information and transferring it to the children. How does this information go to the children? Through a process called as cell division. So the nucleus helps in storing the genetic information from the parents and giving it to the children. And the nucleus is also responsible for cell division. If there is a single cell, if it has to become a multicellular organism, each cell has to divide multiple times to become a multicellular organism. So it is the function of the nucleus to divide, redivide, so that it increases in its number. So this is how a single cell divides. So nucleus helps in cell division also. So there is a single cell. Then slowly you will notice that there is a constriction happening in between. Slowly the constriction deepens, and the nucleus is also, you can see here, the nucleus is also splitting into two slowly. Finally, one cell becomes into two cells. Okay, you see the process. So this process of cell division also is due to the information in the nucleus. So for example, you see the dolphin child looks like the dolphin mother because the genetic information that is stored in the nucleus is the same, and so the child looks like the parent. Okay, the same with the plants, the same with the birds. This is the mother's genetic information. Okay, all the genes characteristics such as color, shape, and all these things will be, the genetic information will be stored in the nucleus. So the single cell of a parent divides and divides and divides, and it forms the child. Okay, so that is why the children or the offspring of a bird looks like the bird itself. The child of a dolphin looks like the dolphin itself. The hair, you see the similarities. The mother's hair is transferred to the child because the mother's cell contained the genetic information. It divided and divided and further divided to form a same imprint on the child. So that was the nucleus. Now let us see. We will notice that cells are divided into two types: prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Now what are prokaryote cells? Just look at this cell. This is a prokaryotic cell. When you look into the prokaryotic cell, you will notice that the nucleus is not having a specific shape. It is irregular. Okay, it does not have a proper organized nucleus. Okay, it seems to be scattered, seems to be irregular. So the cells in which the nucleus is not a definite, okay, in which the nucleus is not organized properly, these cells are called as prokaryotic cells. Now we observe this cell. How is the nucleus in this cell? It has an organized nucleus. It has a specific shape. It has a definite shape. Okay, all the nucleus is properly organized. Look at this nucleus and look at this nucleus. You see a difference? This is irregular, unorganized. This nucleus is very organized, neat, and it is having a definite nucleus. So, this is called as a eukaryotic cell. This is called as a prokaryotic cell. So, what is a prokaryotic cell? Where there is absence of an organized nucleus, that is called as a prokaryotic cell. So, the nucleus is not properly organized. Okay. So, it is absence of an organized nucleus is called as a prokaryote. Example, in a cyanobacterium, which is the blue-green bacterium, you find this kind of nucleus. In a eukaryotic cell, there is an organized nucleus. The nucleus is very organized. For example, in all animal cells and plant cells, you will find that the nucleus is organized. So, this is called as a eukaryotic cell. Do all cells have a nucleus then? Almost all cells, all eukaryotic cells have a nucleus except the red blood cells. Red blood cells do not have a nucleus. Similarly, the sieve tube cells in a plant also do not have a nucleus. Okay. So, these two things do not have a nucleus. Red blood cells in a human being and the sieve tube cells in a plant cell, they do not have a nucleus. So, now let us look into cytoplasm. What is cytoplasm? When you observe a cell under a microscope, you will notice that the borders of the cell are stained in dark blue color. This is a cell wall or the cell membrane. Okay, this is the cell membrane. But you will also see that there is light blue color in between. This is called as the cytoplasm of the cell. So, when you look into the structure, when you see a cell, this is the cell membrane, which is the outer covering. Inside you see the blue color part, right, this fluid part. This is called as the cytoplasm. So, it is the cell's fluid, it contains the cell's fluid and it is enclosed in a plasma membrane or the cell membrane. Around the cytoplasm, this is the cytoplasm, right, the blue color one. Around the cytoplasm, what do you notice on the border? There is a cell membrane. So, it is enclosed in a cell membrane. Okay, it is a fluid in which cell organelles float around. So, you will notice that in this fluid you will find the nucleus, you will find mitochondria, you will find different kind of cell organelles are all present in the cytoplasm. Okay. The fluid material inside the nuclear membrane is called as nucleoplasm. The fluid material outside the nuclear membrane is called as the cytoplasm. See, now when you observe a cell, you have the cell wall, which is the outer layer, and then the blue color part in which all the cell organelles like nucleus, mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi bodies are all present. They all float around this fluid. This fluid is called as the cytoplasm. Okay. Inside the nucleus also there is a fluid. This fluid is called as the nucleoplasm. The fluid which is inside the nucleus is a nucleoplasm. The fluid which is outside the nucleus is called as the cytoplasm. You are understanding? The blue color fluid. I said the cell is full of fluid. This is called as the cytoplasm. Okay. When you look into the fluid which is inside the nucleus is called as the nucleoplasm. The fluid which is outside the nucleus is called as the cytoplasm, and together they are called as the protoplasm. So, I will finish it for today. So, today's exercise is for you to look into the cell. I want you all to draw the cells, observe the cells that is there in your textbook, look at the typical plant cell and the animal cell in your textbook. Okay. Go through these diagrams, observe them carefully. Okay. Then close the books, draw the diagrams and label the parts. Okay. This is your task, and do not show it until I ask. Do not post it on the WhatsApp. Only when I ask you to post them on the WhatsApp, you should post them. Okay. So, you have to learn the diagrams of a plant cell and an animal cell. Observe them, and I want you to read the textbook starting from cell structure and functions. From the starting page, yes, from the starting page, cell structure and functions, I want you all to read the whole textbook until the cell wall, until the nucleus. Today we have completed the nucleus, right? So, you should learn the structure of the nucleus also. Observe and learn until here. You should read the textbook. That is the task for you, that is the assignment or homework for you. Read the whole textbook until nucleus. Okay. Cell organelles I will explain in the next class. I want you all to read and learn the diagrams that is given in your textbook. Okay. Go through all the activities also. So, we will discuss yesterday's answer question. I asked you 3 questions.